Imagine working your hardest, staying late, and constantly going above and beyond, only to be slapped in the face with a demotion by your own boss. That's exactly what happened to me. I had been putting in 110%, hitting targets, and even getting praise from everyone except my boss, Amanda. And yet, when I walked into her office one afternoon, thinking I was about to get a promotion, she hit me with the coldest surprise of my life. A demotion, no explanation, no warning, just a sharp, "We're downsizing your role." As she leaned back in her chair, barely hiding her smug smile, I could see it. She was jealous and I had become her target. Before we start, type 1 if you've ever dreamed of getting revenge but never got the chance. No judgment here. And hit that subscribe button. We don't let betrayal slide around here, not even from people who don't subscribe. Let's continue. My name is Sarah, and I'm a 32-year-old marketing manager. For as long as I can remember, I've always been the type to work hard for everything I get. No shortcuts, no relying on luck, just pure grit. I grew up in a small town where my mom taught me the value of determination and being the hardest worker in the room. So when I landed a job at a well-known advertising agency in Chicago, I was thrilled. It felt like the culmination of all my hard work. I was good at what I did, too. I wasn't just showing up for the paycheck. I wanted to make an impact. Whether it was brainstorming ideas for clients or managing big campaigns, I always put my best foot forward. My colleagues respected me for my dedication, and my team often looked to me for guidance. But the one person who didn't seem impressed was my boss, Amanda. Amanda, who was in her late 40s, had been at the company longer than I had. On the surface, she came across as a confident leader, but I always felt something was off. It wasn't just that she had a more senior position, there was this unspoken tension between us. She'd smile politely when I delivered big results, but there was something about the way her eyes would narrow just a little, something I couldn't quite place at first. It didn't take long for me to realize that Amanda was threatened by me. And unfortunately, I had no idea just how far that jealousy would go until it all came crashing down. It all came to a head on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I had been busting my butt on a major campaign for a client that could bring in a big chunk of business for the agency. My team and I were practically living at the office, working late into the nights, tweaking every little detail, ensuring nothing was overlooked. We were on track to hit it out of the park. That day, Amanda called me into her office. I wasn't nervous. I figured we were finally going to talk about the campaign's success and how we could present it to the client. But as soon as I walked in, I felt the tension in the air. Amanda's usual tight smile was gone, replaced by something I couldn't quite pinpoint, maybe disdain or worse, a silent judgment. She motioned for me to sit, her tone all business. "I've been reviewing your performance," she started, "and there's something I need to address." I nodded, ready for feedback, assuming it was something minor. But then she dropped the bomb. "I'm going to have to demote you," she said, as if she were talking about changing the office's coffee supplier. No explanation, no reason, just a cold, "We're downsizing your role." My mind went blank. I blinked, trying to process her words. "Wait, what?" I stammered. "I've been working overtime, the campaign's doing well, what's going on?" But her expression didn't change, and the words coming out of her mouth were just as sharp as before. I walked out of that office feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. In an instant, everything I had worked for felt like it was slipping through my fingers. The worst part? Amanda barely seemed affected by what she'd just done. I sat at my desk, numb. It felt like the floor had just dropped out from under me. I tried to wrap my head around what had just happened. Amanda, my boss, had demoted me for no real reason. I could barely focus on the emails piling up in my inbox. So naturally, I did what anyone in my situation would do. I called my best friend and colleague, Jenna. Jenna had been with the company longer than I had, and she'd seen the good, bad, and downright ugly of office politics. I needed someone to vent to, someone who could make sense of this madness. "Okay, Sarah," she said after I filled her in on what went down. "This is big, we need a plan, but first let me get this straight. You're telling me she just demoted you? For no reason. Did she give you a performance review or an actual explanation?" I laughed bitterly. "Nope, just a cold downsizing your role and that was it, like she was canceling a lunch meeting." "No, hey Sarah, you've been working your butt off, but I think you need to step back." Just bam, I'm demoted. Jenna paused, then said something that hit me like a ton of bricks. "You don't think she's jealous, do you?" That word jealous hung in the air. Of course, it made sense now. Amanda, with her constant need for control and her cutting remarks, had been threatened by my success. She couldn't handle being outshone, so she found a way to push me down, but I wasn't about to let her get away with it. Jealous or not, I'm not going to just roll over and take it. I'm going to figure out how to turn this around, I said, determination creeping into my voice. Hell yeah, Jenna replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm. We'll show Amanda who's really running this show. Spoiler alert. It's not her. The demotion wasn't just a blow to my career, it was a hit to my pride, my self-esteem, and frankly, my sanity. I couldn't sit around and sulk, though. I had to keep going. The next morning, I put on my best I'm totally fine face, walked into the office, and tried to pretend that nothing had changed. The usual office buzz surrounded me, but it felt like I was walking through fog, disconnected from the world around me. The first obstacle was the immediate sense of alienation. Amanda, of course, acted like nothing had happened. She gave me one of her patented tight smiles when she saw me. "Good morning, Sarah," she said, like she wasn't the one who had crushed my career the day before. I forced a smile, knowing full well that if I said anything out of line, she'd use it against me in an instant. My colleagues, on the other hand, noticed. Jenna raised an eyebrow at me as I passed by her desk. "You good?" she asked, her voice low. She was the only one who could read me like an open book. "I'm fine," I muttered. "Just fine." As I sat down at my desk, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, scrutinized. It wasn't just Amanda. Now my colleagues seemed to be circling around me like vultures, waiting for me to make a mistake. Some, like Dave from accounting, seemed overly chipper. "Hey, Sarah," he greeted me with a grin that was probably too big for a Monday morning. "How's it feel being downsized?" I gritted my teeth. Dave had never been a fan of mine, and now he saw an opportunity to make a jab. I could feel my temper rising, but I knew better than to give him the satisfaction of reacting. "Better than I expected," I replied, forcing a smile. "Thanks for asking, Dave." As the day dragged on, the obstacles kept piling up. Amanda had clearly been working overtime to find ways to make my life more difficult. She handed me a project that was already behind schedule, with barely any context or resources to go with it. "You'll figure it out, Sarah," she said, dismissively waving her hand. "We need results." I stared at the spreadsheet in front of me. It was a mess. Not the kind of project you could just figure out without hours of extra work. It was clear she wanted me to fail. She didn't want me to succeed. She wanted me to stay in that demoted role for as long as possible, to keep me under her thumb. I knew that if I let her get away with this, I'd lose everything. My career, my confidence, it would all be gone. But I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of seeing me falter. No, I was going to outsmart her, and I'd do it in a way she never saw coming. But first, I had to survive the day. And that was proving to be harder than I'd expected. Midday, I walked into the break room to grab a coffee. As I poured it, I overheard a conversation between Lisa from HR and Mark, a senior project manager. They were talking about me, and though they were speaking in hushed tones, it wasn't hard to make out the words. "I heard she was demoted," Lisa said. "Do you think she'll just quit?" "I mean, who wants to stick around after that?" Mark's reply wasn't much better. "I wouldn't be surprised. The woman's a hard worker, but I don't know how she'll take it. Amanda's a tough boss." I forced myself to stay calm. The last thing I needed was for people to start thinking I'd give up. They clearly didn't understand what I was made of, and Amanda was underestimating me if she thought I'd just roll over and accept defeat. The second obstacle came later that afternoon when Amanda called me into her office again. This time, I walked in with a purpose. I wasn't going to sit there quietly and accept whatever she threw at me. If she thought she could crush me with her passive-aggressive tactics, she had another thing coming. She was sitting behind her desk, papers strewn about, her eyes trained on her computer screen. She didn't even look up when I entered. "Sit down, Sarah," she said, her voice as cold as ever. I sat, trying not to let my frustration show. "I noticed you've been distracted," she continued, finally looking up. "I'm going to need you to focus. If you're not up to the task, maybe it's time for you to reconsider your position here." Her words stung, but I refused to let her see it. Instead, I kept my voice steady. "I'm focused, Amanda. Don't worry about me." She raised an eyebrow, clearly displeased by my response, but she didn't press the issue, not yet. "I want a report on my desk by the end of the day," she ordered. "And make it good." "I'll have it to you by the end of the day," I replied, getting up to leave. I didn't let her see the sweat on my palms. I didn't let her see the storm brewing inside of me. I had a job to do, and I wasn't going to let Amanda's pettiness derail me. But the obstacles kept coming. It was like she was throwing everything she could at me, trying to break me down. Each time I overcame one challenge, she threw another in my path. Whether it was assigning me impossible tasks or questioning my work, she was relentless. And yet, each time I found a way to push back. I kept my head down and worked harder, showing up earlier, staying later. I refused to give her the satisfaction of watching me fail, because deep down, I knew this wasn't just about a job anymore. It was about proving to myself, and to Amanda, that I could rise above her petty games. And I was going to make sure she realized that she had made a huge mistake underestimating me. But before I could truly turn the tide, something unexpected happened, something that would change everything. And that's when I realized I wasn't just playing Amanda's game anymore. I was creating my own. The tension in the office was becoming unbearable. Amanda seemed to be doubling down on her mission to keep me under her thumb, and the more she pushed, the more determined I became to turn the tables. The demotion had thrown me off course for a while, but now I could feel the fire inside me reigniting. I wasn't just going to let her win. I was going to rise above, and I was going to do it in a way that would make her regret ever trying to knock me down. One afternoon, as I was working on yet another impossible project she had assigned me, I overheard something that made my heart race with both excitement and a little bit of dread. It was Jenna again. She was sitting in the break room talking to Dave from accounting, who, as I mentioned earlier, had been a thorn in my side since my first day. "I heard Amanda's been making some questionable decisions," Jenna was saying. "You know that thing with Sarah, it's looking more like sabotage than management." I couldn't hear Dave's reply, but I could tell by the way Jenna looked over at me that she was talking about the demotion. I walked over, trying to act casual but failing miserably. "What's all this about sabotage?" I asked, trying to play it cool but feeling the adrenaline start to buzz in my chest. Jenna smiled like she'd been waiting for me. I didn't want to say anything, but Amanda's been making some waves. She's been assigning people to projects and then pulling them at the last minute. "You're not the only one getting the short end of the stick, Sarah." That's when it hit me. Amanda wasn't just targeting me. She was undermining other people in the office too. She was building a wall around herself, isolating her team and making sure no one could do their best work without her interference. And here I was, thinking I was the only one being thrown under the bus. "This sounds like it's going to catch up with her," I said, my mind racing. "Oh, it will," Jenna said with a sly grin, "but you've got to be smart about it. Don't let her have the upper hand. You've been playing nice, but it's time to turn the tables. You've got the skills, Sarah. You've got the brains. It's time to start using them against her." From that moment forward, I started playing the long game. I began gathering information, piecing together the puzzle of Amanda's actions and her mismanagement. Every conversation I overheard, every email I read, and every little inconsistency in Amanda's behavior became a piece of ammunition I could use later. I knew I had to be careful. I couldn't act too fast or too openly. Amanda was clever, and she would pick up on any signs that I was plotting against her. But as I watched her interact with others in the office, it became clear. She was arrogant. She thought she was untouchable. That was her fatal flaw. I started taking notes. I'd overhear Amanda giving poor advice to her team, mismanaging resources, and even making promises to clients that we couldn't possibly deliver on. All of this could be used against her if the time was right. But I also knew I needed to keep my cards close to my chest. One wrong move, and Amanda would have me out of the company faster than I could say unfair. And then came the moment that changed everything. I was assigned to an all-hands meeting with Amanda and the rest of the team. It was the kind of meeting that usually started with everyone exchanging pleasantries, followed by Amanda's long-winded presentations. But this time, something was different. As we sat around the table, Amanda was giving her usual spiel about reaching our goals and team cohesion. I wasn't really listening. Instead, I was mentally reviewing everything I had gathered, thinking about the next steps. Suddenly, Amanda dropped a bombshell. "I've been thinking about restructuring the team," she announced, her eyes scanning the room like a lion sizing up its prey. "We need to make some tough decisions about who stays and who goes. Performance reviews are coming up, and I expect everyone to step it up." She said it like she was doing us a favor, like she had any idea what was going on behind the scenes. I could see the tension in the room, the uncertainty in my colleagues' eyes. But that wasn't what caught my attention. What made my blood run cold was the way Amanda looked at me. It wasn't a casual glance, nor was it one of her usual condescending smiles. It was a look that screamed, "I've already made my decision about you." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about a demotion. Amanda was preparing to push me out completely. She was going to try to take me down once and for all. And yet, I couldn't help but smile to myself, because at that moment I realized something crucial. Amanda had no idea that I had already been gathering the information I needed to take her down. The game was on. I wasn't just going to get back at her, I was going to expose her for the incompetent, jealous boss she truly was. And when I did, I knew it would be sweet, and it would be all the more satisfying because Amanda would never see it coming. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about making sure she understood exactly who she was messing with. The days that followed the meeting felt like I was walking a tightrope. Amanda had made it clear that I was in her sights, and the target on my back had never been bigger. But something had changed inside me. I was no longer the vulnerable employee desperately trying to stay afloat. Now I was the one playing her game, and I was determined to come out on top. I started to put my plan into motion. I had already gathered plenty of dirt on Amanda. Her mismanagement, the botched client promises, the way she had repeatedly overlooked team members' contributions. It was a lot to work with, but the challenge was figuring out how to use it. I couldn't just march into her office and confront her head-on. That would be a mistake. I needed to be strategic, subtle. Jenna was, of course, my most trusted ally. We had become a bit of a team, quietly strategizing in the corners of the office, exchanging notes, and slowly uncovering more about Amanda's weaknesses. It was in one of those quiet conversations that Jenna dropped another bombshell. "You know," she said, "I've been hearing things about Amanda's behavior at the last leadership retreat. Word is, she got into a huge argument with upper management about her team-building ideas. They thought she was too controlling and demanding. I don't know, maybe it's just office gossip, but it's interesting." That was it. I didn't need to hear more. This was the ammunition I needed. If I could bring that up at the right time, it could completely unravel Amanda's authority. I started subtly planting the seed, mentioning it in casual conversations with a few higher-ups. If Amanda had alienated the top brass, it would only be a matter of time before they realized what kind of manager they had in charge. But there was one more obstacle in my way: the HR department. Lisa from HR had always been Amanda's most loyal supporter. If there was ever a whisper of trouble, Lisa would be the first to cover Amanda's back. She had been with the company for years, and her influence was hard to ignore. I knew that if I wanted to expose Amanda, I'd need to get past Lisa, and that wasn't going to be easy. I had to be careful. I started finding ways to interact with Lisa more, casual small talk in the break room, discussing office events, and even offering her some help on a few HR-related tasks. My goal wasn't to become best friends with Lisa, but to show her that I wasn't a threat. I needed her to trust me, to believe that I was just another employee who had no interest in shaking things up. Then one day I got an unexpected phone call. It was from Mark, the senior project manager. We had never been close, but I had always admired his ability to see through the nonsense that went on in the office. Mark was calling because he had heard through the grapevine that Amanda was planning another round of performance reviews. And this time, she was going to weed out the weak links. This was huge. Mark had inside information, and if he was hearing whispers about Amanda's leadership flaws, then others were, too. I knew I couldn't wait much longer to act. I had to push forward, but now, with more pieces in place, I had the confidence to do so. The next day, I got a call from Amanda. She asked me to come into her office for a private discussion. I knew exactly what this was. She was going to try to break me down again. I walked in, and sure enough, she was sitting behind her desk, looking at me with that cold, calculated expression that made my skin crawl. "Sarah," she started, her voice smooth and patronizing, "I've been noticing some of your recent work, and frankly, I'm not impressed. I think we both know that this role might not be the right fit for you. Maybe it's time to consider a different path." I could feel my blood pressure rise, but I kept my voice steady. "Actually, Amanda, I think I've been doing just fine. And if anything, it's your management style that's been making things difficult for everyone." Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time I saw a flicker of doubt. "What are you talking about?" "I've been talking to people, Amanda. People who are starting to see the cracks in your leadership. The way you've been micromanaging and making decisions that harm the team. I think it's only a matter of time before upper management catches on to what's going on." Her face went pale. She opened her mouth, then closed it again as if she were trying to figure out how to respond. But she couldn't. I had hit a nerve. "You don't know what you're talking about," she finally spat, her voice tight. Oh, I do, I said, leaning in just a little. And you know what? If I were you, I'd be careful about throwing your weight around too much. People are starting to notice, and sooner or later it's going to come back to bite you. The tension in the room was thick, and for a brief moment I thought she might fire me right then and there. But instead she just looked at me, her jaw clenched, and nodded curtly. "We'll see about that," she said before dismissing me. As I walked out of her office, my heart was racing, but I knew something had shifted. I had confronted her head-on, and I hadn't backed down. Amanda was rattled, and that was the first real victory I had. It wasn't over yet, but I could feel the tide starting to turn. The obstacles were still there, but I had finally crossed a line I wasn't going to let her cross again. The power was slowly slipping from her hands, and I could see the path ahead, a path where I would take the lead. The meeting with Amanda had left me shaken, but not defeated. I could feel the walls closing in on her, and I knew it was only a matter of time before I could deliver the final blow. But just when I thought I had everything in place, something completely unexpected happened, something that would shift everything in my favor. It was a typical Thursday afternoon when the news came through. I had just wrapped up a long meeting with my team, reviewing progress on a major campaign, when I received an email from HR. The subject line was innocuous enough: company-wide performance review results. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something inside me told me to open it. What I found made my heart skip a beat. The email contained the results of the leadership survey that had been circulating for the past few weeks. It was a confidential poll about the effectiveness of the company's leadership team, and naturally, Amanda had been one of the subjects. The results, let's just say they weren't pretty. A few bold, anonymous responses had made their way through, calling out Amanda's management style, her micromanagement, her lack of support for her team, and her constant undermining of employees. The survey also showed that more than half of her team was dissatisfied with her leadership. But what really caught my eye was the final paragraph of the email. "This survey has been forwarded to the executive board for review and immediate action." It hit me like a freight train. Not only was the company aware of Amanda's shortcomings, but they were also actively investigating her leadership. This was exactly what I needed: official, documented evidence of Amanda's incompetence that I could use to expose her. The best part, I hadn't even had to do anything. Someone higher up was already taking action. I quickly reached out to Jenna, barely able to contain my excitement. "You won't believe what I just found," I said, practically breathless. "The company's finally catching on to Amanda's mess. They've got a whole survey detailing her bad management, and it's heading to the executive board." Jenna was quiet for a moment, then let out a low whistle. "You've got to be kidding me. So you're telling me the higher-ups are finally waking up? Talk about timing." "I know," I replied. "And now we've got leverage. It's just a matter of waiting for the right moment to step in." As the pieces started to fall into place, I realized just how much I had underestimated the power of the situation. Amanda had spent so much time trying to control everything, she never saw the cracks forming around her. The plot twist wasn't that Amanda would finally be exposed, it was that the exposure had already started, and I didn't have to be the one to make the first move. The game had changed. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was going to make sure that Amanda's reign was over, and when it ended, I'd be the one standing tall, not her. The weight of the situation hit me all at once. With the survey results in hand, I knew that Amanda was on the verge of being exposed, but there was still a risk that things could backfire. The last thing I wanted was to be caught in the crossfire, or for Amanda to turn the tables and accuse me of stirring the pot. She still had a lot of influence, and the executive board hadn't made any moves yet. If I wasn't careful, I could find myself out of a job too. It was that moment of uncertainty that made my stomach twist. I had no control over how the board would react, or what Amanda might do if she found out I was aware of her impending downfall. Would she lash out? Would she try to frame me for her own mismanagement? The last thing I wanted was to be left standing there, collateral damage in a battle I wasn't prepared for. I walked into work the next morning, and there was a sense of calm in the air. But the moment I saw Amanda in the hallway, I could feel her eyes on me. There was no smile, no pleasantries, just a tense silence between us. Her usual confident swagger had been replaced with an air of unease that was impossible to ignore. It was as if she knew the walls were closing in. That's when I realized, this wasn't just about getting back at her anymore. It was about making sure that when the dust settled, I would be safe. I needed to make my move, but I had to be strategic. One wrong move now, and everything I had worked for could unravel. My career, my reputation, it was all on the line. The stakes were higher than ever. If I wanted to come out of this unscathed, I needed to act fast, but I couldn't rush it. The next step was crucial. If I played this right, I'd win back everything Amanda tried to take from me. But if I failed, I knew I'd be left with nothing. ChatGPT Danoi, the morning after the crisis was when everything started to fall into place. I knew I had to act fast but with precision. The situation with Amanda was on the brink of collapse, but I had to ensure that the final push was handled delicately. I wasn't going to let the company board make the decision without a little nudge. It was time to take matters into my own hands. I spent the entire morning preparing, gathering the evidence I'd quietly compiled over the past few weeks. Amanda's mismanagement, the team's dissatisfaction, the performance review results that were already in motion, and the overheard conversations. Everything I needed was right there in front of me, ready to be handed to the higher-ups. But I couldn't just walk into the boardroom and throw it all on the table. No, this had to be strategic. I decided to set up a meeting with the CEO, Robert. I'd worked with him on a few projects before, and though he wasn't the most approachable guy, I knew he respected results. I wasn't going to present this as a personal vendetta against Amanda. I was going to frame it as a matter of company efficiency and morale. I couldn't let him think I was bitter or trying to ruin Amanda out of spite. This was about the company's success, not just mine. When I walked into Robert's office, I took a deep breath, holding my composure. "I've come to you with something important," I started. "It's about Amanda's leadership, and I believe it's affecting the entire team's performance." I could see the wheels turning in his head as I laid everything out, clearly, concisely. The survey results, the complaints, the missed opportunities, all of it. Robert listened without interruption, his eyes narrowing only once when I mentioned the anonymous survey and the impending board review. By the time I left his office, I knew the tide had turned. The ball was in motion. The company wasn't going to overlook Amanda anymore. For the first time in months, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. The resolution wasn't just in bringing Amanda down, it was in ensuring that the company would be better for it. And in doing so, I had reclaimed my career, my confidence, and my place at the table. A week passed, and the tension in the office was palpable. Amanda seemed more on edge than ever, and the whispers around the office had only grown louder. I kept my head down, focusing on my work, but I could feel the shift. People were starting to recognize that things were about to change. Then, one afternoon, I received an email from Robert, the CEO. The subject line read, "Meeting request." My heart skipped a beat. I knew this was it. It was time to face the consequences of everything I had set in motion. I walked into his office, steeling myself for whatever was about to happen. But what I didn't expect was the smile on his face when he greeted me. "Sarah, I've reviewed the concerns you raised, and I want to thank you for bringing this to our attention. We've had some serious conversations at the board level, and changes are coming." I didn't know whether to feel relief or excitement, but I managed to keep my composure. "I just want what's best for the company," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "Of course," Robert nodded. "We're implementing some leadership changes effective immediately. Amanda will be stepping down, and we'll be reassessing the structure of the team." I couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. Amanda was out, and I had been instrumental in making it happen. As the days went on, the office dynamic shifted. People started to feel more empowered, more confident in their roles. It wasn't just about me anymore, it was about the whole team reclaiming their voices. In the end, I didn't just survive, I thrived. I was offered a new position, one that came with more responsibility and the respect I'd earned. I had fought hard to get here, and the best part, I had done it on my own terms.